Okay, I think I'll get started now. Thank you and welcome to Careers in Energy Week. This week is Careers in Energy Week, and we're really excited about that. And I'd like to welcome you to Energy Careers 2021. This session is focused on environmental justice and energy justice for all. So I'm really excited about this panel and the great work that these two phenomenal women are doing for the industry. And we'll learn more about their great work. Before we begin, if there are any questions, I'd encourage you all to please enter them in the chat feature. There is a conversation bubble at the top or the bottom of your screen. Just click on that and enter your questions and we'll be able to answer them. We will allow for time for questions towards the end of the session. And then without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, our esteemed panelists. So first, I'd like to introduce Pooja Bohra. And Pooja is a Director of Business Strategy for Slipstream. Thank you, Pooja, for joining us today. I'd also like to introduce Kyla Mainsay. And Kyla is a Director of Environmental Justice for the New York Power Authority. Thank you, Kyla, for joining us today as well. Really excited. I am not going to read their bios because we'll be here for a while if I do, but their bios can be found in the Resource Center under Resources. Just click on that and you'll see a listing of the bios and you'll be able to read up about Pooja and Kyla and the great work that they're doing and have done. So why don't we get started? First of all, let's find out a little bit about what you do for your companies before we really get into the meat of things and ask questions. So, and I apologize for that. I turned off my phone, but not my computer. Anyway, so let me start with you, Pooja. Would you mind speaking a little bit about and talking a little bit about some of the work that you do?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone from Boston, and thank you for joining in today. I work for a nonprofit organization called Slipstream, and we primarily focus on clean energy research, and we support federal, state, and local governments and utilities in designing and implementing programs that bring about energy efficiency in residential and commercial building sectors. And we're slowly expanding our work in efficient transportation sector as well. And we typically work in the areas of research that includes research in new technologies that are cleaner, more energy efficient for heating and cooling buildings. We do market research, not just for efficient building systems, but also battery storage, community solar. We also do studies on opportunities and barriers to clean energy in tribal communities, low income rural communities, and whether disadvantaged homes are receiving the benefits of efficiency in energy or not. And then we also do research in health impacts in homes like mold, indoor air quality, especially affordable rental properties. And then we do education and trainings to building professionals and contractors that contributes towards green jobs. And we also reach out to communities, whether it's homes or businesses or universities, and advise them on what they can do in their buildings to reduce their building utility bills and healthier buildings.
That's a handful. A lot of stuff is being done. A lot of great work is being done, and we're going to probe a little bit more and get a little deeper there. But I want to go to Kyla and find out, Kyla, as your job in terms of the work that you do at NYPA, the New York Power Authority. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, and thank you very much, Rosa. It's great to be here and to share a stage with Pooja as well. Sounds like you're doing some great work, Pooja. So I'm in New York. I'm sitting in Westchester, New York, and I work for the New York Power Authority, and I do environmental justice programs there. But the New York Power Authority, I want to give you a little bit of background because some people might not have heard of us. We're also called NYPA, and we're the largest state public utility in the nation. We make electricity, we generate generate and transmit electricity for New York State. And 80% of the electricity we generate is hydropower. So we own the hydropower plants on the border with Canada, the St. Lawrence Power Dam, and then also at Niagara Falls, the hydropower facility there. And so we make most of the electricity with hydropower upstate, and then we transmit it downstate to the high load pockets where most of the population is in New York State. And so that means we also own the transmission lines as well. Our largest, tell you a little bit about our customers. Our largest customer group is the governmental customers. So we provide electricity for large public buildings like the state universities, the city universities, large public housing authorities. And if you're from New York, you know the MTA. So the buses, transit systems, the subways all run on electricity generated by the New York Power Authority. In terms of our customers, we don't just supply them with power, we also work with them to help them meet their sustainability or decarbonization goals. So for example, if a large SUNY State University building like SUNY Buffalo, for example, wanted to change their HVAC system from kind of an oil or gas, and they wanted to put solar in, then we'd create a master plan to help them achieve that goal. And then finally, NYPA is a state utility, so the money that we generate from the sale of our electricity and from our commercial operations in energy efficiency projects, we put back into the state budget, and it's actually used as economic development funds. So what we do is an important sort of economic engine for New York State. We provide low-cost power to businesses in exchange for a commitment to retain jobs or create new jobs. And so my job at the New York Power Authority is to just reach out to the communities that host our facilities and create energy programs for them.
That's great. So exciting. Man, you probably never would have thought that and dreamt that, but that's great. So I'd love to probe. I want to find out more about some of the very specific programs that you're both implementing around environmental and social justice. And I think that we talked previously, and it's just so exciting to me, some of the work that you're doing. But before we even start there, I'd love to learn more about and just ask the question, what is environmental justice? What does it mean? Because some of the folks that might be participating and listening in might not really be clear on what that means. So Kyla, why don't we start with you, and then I'll go to Pooja and get your perspective on what is environmental justice in your mind.
Absolutely. So kind of the classic definition for environmental justice is from the EPA, and it really means the fair treatment, the meaningful involvement, and informed consent of all people, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, their income, with respect to the development and deployment of environmental laws and policies. And so additionally, the EPA and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in New York, they define these environmental justice communities. And they have these filters and maps, GIS maps based on race, on census data, on proximity to industrial processes, on historical exposure to emissions. And they've built these GIS maps, and they've actually defined where these environmental justice communities live. And so we've taken those definitions of communities, and we've drawn a radius, and we've kind of overlaid that information on where our facilities are, and we draw a radius of proximity to our generating facilities. So at NYPA, environmental justice means being a good neighbor to those environmental justice communities within proximity of our facilities. That's what it means to us.
That's awesome. Great. Pooja.
No, I think Kyla set a very good stage for what exactly environmental justice is, and I think it aligns with what we, when we are providing those solutions to our clients and customers, is also very apt. But I would just like to add that to me, energy justice is what environmental justice is also, because energy plays a significant role in the larger environmental justice context. And what I mean by that is equity in energy, or equal access to energy. And getting further down, I would say that it means affordable and clean energy that is available to all. And this is the type of energy that is also creating jobs within communities in a perfect world. And expanding it further to say that in order to achieve that type of energy, there needs to be active participation of all, especially the hard to reach and disadvantaged communities that Kyla has already, alluded to.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Pooja, in your role in your company, you've talked about working with the energy industry and energy companies. Can you talk about how you see, and I think you just mentioned it, but can you broaden that in talking about how the energy industry plays a role and how they can play a role and how you can see them playing a role in the future in environmental justice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the energy industry has a large role to play in environmental justice. And there are some aspects of this that they're already doing, but there needs to be much more. And we know from working in the energy industry that there's much more potential for us being engaged in it. And I can think of a few specific areas, and I'm sure Kyla would expand to more as well. What comes to mind is R&D, research and development in clean energy that is affordable and provides lower carbon solutions and sources of energy. I think that really contributes to environmental justice that the energy industry needs to come together to do and is in some way already investing in. The other thing I can think about is investments in clean energy in communities designated as environmental justice communities by their states. That's another thing that I can think of. And then third is engagement with communities to co-create energy solutions with the local community. I think that's must, and that's something that I think Kyla, your group at NIPA are also focusing on. The other thing I can think about is for the energy industry to recognize that there are diverse end users. There are people living in different neighborhoods who are people of color, who are low income, all kinds of end users. And so designing energy programs based on the diverse communities is essential. And I think for that to happen, the energy industry needs to hire a diverse workforce as well, because that's the only way to create programs that are diverse. And then lastly, I would just add that the energy policymakers have a role to play in where the energy industry needs to go, because then it is coming from the top and it becomes a mandatory requirement to ensure energy justice. So those are some of the high level, big picture concepts that come to mind when working in the energy industry.
And Pooja, thank you for that. And I see the energy industry moving in that direction as I look at all the energy industry and the companies that we work with across the industry. I see that diversity, equity, and inclusion are key and primary. At the Center for Energy Workforce Development, one of the things that we do work on and are working on is a roadmap for change, and to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion from that lens and looking at every aspect of what we do. So thank you for that. I think I see that happening across the industry. Kyla, I know that oh, I hear some feedback. I hear that I know NIPA has an environmental justice strategy. You have some programs that you're working on. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy and some of the key components of your programs?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think what Pooja said was really important about involvement of the community in developing some of these programs so that they, can inform the programs as well. And so, historically, the Power Authority has had an environmental justice department for over 20 years, but it was mainly a grant funding program, and it wasn't in terms of community outreach. It was just kind of, give the checks out and to the different communities. But a few years ago, the Power Authority made a new commitment to these communities. And so the department is relatively new. We have a new vice president who was hired a few years ago. And so it started really with two people, myself and this vice president. What we decided to do was embark on a statewide listening tour to look at all those, we met with legislators, environmental leaders, advocates, community-based organizations. And we asked them a fundamental question, like, how can NIPA leverage its expertise in energy policy and energy programs to support your mission. And based on that community feedback, we really built a grassroots program that is community informed. And, we're happy that we took kind of all that input and we went to our board of trustees, and now we have a fully funded department with staffing and, programs to deploy. And we deploy these programs in 4 ways. We started with STEM because, some of the research that we did, and, we spoke to Rosa as well, and, the organizations that can support us. The utility industry is an aging workforce, and, not just at NYPA, but at Con Ed, National Grid, and it's projected that over the next 5 years, a lot of people will retire and age out of the workforce. And so, there's issues of just transition and equity, so that we ensure that the communities that are actually hosting these facilities participate and fill that pipeline of the new utility workers of the future. So that's what our STEM program focuses on. We try and spark an interest in electricity, in generation, and clean energy, clean transportation, basically everything that NYPA does. We build a curriculum and we try and spark that interest and support students to pursue those subjects. And our staff teach that curriculum ourselves. The second pillar, really quickly, is about adults. We try and ensure that a few of the concepts that Pooja was talking about, energy access, what do all of these terms mean? Sometimes we use these large concepts and complicated concepts, so we try and break it down and also make it practical. What can you do to save and conserve the energy that you pay so much for? And so, make sure that you have the right appliances and, weather stripping and the right, what you should set your thermostat. So we have these energy literacy programs for adults. Third thing that we do is we complete small energy projects for within the community. We mainly partner with public housing, large state public housing authorities, because we don't have any residential customers. But upstate, a lot of the residents in public housing pay their own bills. So if we do a project, it actually impacts the actual community. But the most important pillar of our environmental justice program is we consider ourselves an internal voice for the community. And so we advocate internally so that as NYPA deploys energy projects and energy programs, that there's an equity and an environmental justice lens. Consider the communities at the inception of the project. And so that's kind of what we've started doing. As I said, it's relatively new, and so it's an emerging department.
That's amazing, Kyla, to have those communities have a voice at the table. And they're not even aware that there's a voice at the table representing them, which is amazing. And you talked about awareness in the careers that we offer. And I think I see that as a big gap where folks don't really even know that we've got these amazing jobs and amazing careers in their backyard. and so creating that awareness so that even students coming in can even consider coming into work for the energy industry, not think about some of these others like Google and NASA and everything else, but some of the amazing work that we're doing here in the industry. So thank you for that. So now I want to kind of shift a little bit. I heard, Pooja, you talk about R&D. I heard you talk about R&D, Kyla, and the research and development that's being done in the energy space as it pertains to environmental justice. Kyla, I know that NYPA, I want you to tell us about the industry growing kale for a community. And what does that have to do with energy and everything? So tell us a little bit more about that R&D work and that work that you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it is interesting that an electric utility might be concerned about food insecurity and kind of how does that correlate. But through our community engagement programs, we frequently encounter hunger and food insecurity, food justice issues because of the community-based organizations that we partner with, who are our stakeholders. And so, and also the other thing that I would mention, as NYPA deploys various energy projects, our group is asked to analyze the characteristics of those communities communities so that we can check if they're going to be impacted by our programs. And it might not be surprising that sometimes in our analysis, we find some strong correlations, which is obviously research that's been found, but it's interesting and new to us that there's a strong correlation between federally designated food deserts and environmental justice communities. And so when we heard that our R&D team was involved in a national collaboration to help electric utilities understand the potential impact of indoor food production and agriculture as these processes become more electrified, what's going to be the impact as they scale up, there was an opportunity to do this research project and actually place an indoor food production container, which is a shipping container, growing hydroponically kale, which was, I don't know why grow kale, but all the utilities had to grow kale. It was kind of the control plant. And so just to see how it grows in different environments. And so for us, we were excited because it intersects with our mission and it's a benefit to our stakeholders. And it was an important way for NIPA to focus some of that R&D for the benefit of our communities. And so we partnered with an organization called Feed More Western New York, and they provide food, and their activities really scaled up during COVID because, as you know, environmental justice communities were particularly hard hit and impacted by COVID, and so when we actually place this container in their community, and for 16 months they have to grow kale, but it supplements the food that they provide to our stakeholders as well. And so they get to have this container. We provide all the growing supplies. We take the research and kind of the operational aspects so we can feed that national indoor research. But at the end, they get to grow whatever they want. They keep the container. And for us, it was also an opportunity for a new community stakeholder. So their stakeholders, we can now build up some curriculum around climate justice, around sustainability, around energy. So it was an opportunity to actually draw other stakeholders into the energy conversation and how energy intersects with all of these different components. So we were excited about that. And it really generated a lot of interest. And we had all these different kind of requests for a shipping container. So we're doing another one very soon downstate.
Wow. Never would I have imagined that we'd be growing kale. So great. Awesome work. So Pooja, I know that you're working also with a lot of emerging technologies and partnering with the Department of Energy. Can you tell us more about some of the work that you're doing there?
Sure. We have been actually collaborating with the national labs through the Department of Energy funding to field test emerging technologies for energy efficiency in buildings. And the ultimate goal is to identify barriers and opportunities for commercialization and scaling of these new technologies. We all know it's the early adopters who embrace new technologies, and then there are laggards who follow much later. And the idea is, how can we accelerate the scaling of this to everybody? And I'll just give an example. The latest iPhone model will have early buyers, and then there are laggards like me who still have the iPhone 6. And what we've observed is typically these early adopters, as far as the building industry is concerned, are affluent building owners or affluent communities where these emerging technologies are adopted first. So what we're trying to do is shift the dialogue to how can investments of new technologies start with the underserved communities, and then identify ways to develop local expertise for scaling those technologies within the communities. And it's not easy because new technologies cost a lot of money. There's a big incremental cost. How do you address those? But definitely the energy industry, to that point, can come together to identify support and financing for these new technologies within the disadvantaged communities rather than going to affluent communities. So we're trying to generate that dialogue, and we think that the energy industry would come together to come up with solutions to push that into not affluent societies and communities, but to start with the underserved communities.
That's great. Some great work that both of you are doing in that space. I'd like to a little shift now to workforce development. and the hiring of people into the industry. And I think, Kyla, you mentioned that there's retirements happening. There's also a lot of growth in the industry due to some of the innovation that's happening in new technology. And so we know that we need to get our message out there. And Kyla, you talked about the STEM programs. You also are doing internships and scholarships for students. I'd love to learn a lot about your project. And then I know you're doing something very innovative as well that we'd love to learn about. Let's hear from Kyla, though, around a little bit more detail around your STEM program and that you're doing up in New York.
Right, absolutely. And so NIPA's always had kind of a developmental internship program, but as you can imagine, we do a lot of research and development in clean energy, solar, wind, electric vehicles. And so the people that are attracted to our internship, our traditional internship program, have been people who are, after the first year of an engineering degree, sometimes a master's degree or a PhD. So once you have that level of student competing, then, the entry level is very difficult for them to compete. So our STEM program has evolved so that we have now made a commitment to 10 schools over the next 5 years, where we will support the students from 9th grade all the way to the completion of a pre-associate degree. And that's part of the PTech program. You might have heard about it. You should look it up because it's an innovative learning model, inspired by IBM, but now it's being deployed elsewhere. And so we support these students with career exposure models and then also paid internships so that they can shadow our employees for 6 weeks during the summer as they deploy these new programs. And so therefore it will make them more attractive to the energy utility industry. And also, we can hopefully be absorbed within, if not us as a public utility, but certainly it'll be more attractive to the whole of the utility industry. And so this summer we had our first cohort. They worked on battery storage projects, which were real life customer projects. They worked on electric vehicle, traditional kind of the difference between the traditional car versus the electric, the EV, and what are the skills that are going to be needed for these new career pathways. That's what our STEM program is about. We're also providing scholarships for students to actually participate and pursue STEM-related utility energy-focused degrees over the next 4 years. And both of these STEM and the scholarships specifically for students that reside in environmental justice communities, community colleges, SUNYs, CUNYs, but actually disadvantaged students is kind of our criteria for deploying these programs.
That sounds great. And just a follow-up question. So the students, it's 9th through 12th grade. The internships, are they all 4 years, or is it just in their junior and senior years? Typically, that's what happens.
Yeah, we did want to have it throughout the 4 years, but actually, just kind of for logistical reasons, it's for the 12th grade. And usually if they're in a PTech school, then they have until 2 years after 12th grade to actually complete their associate degree. So that's where we actually employ them as interns.
Oh, okay. That's
Yes.
Great. That's great. And how many students have you had? Is this your first year with
It was our first, this summer was our first one, and we only had 15. It was virtual because COVID is still happening, but we're hoping to grow to 100 students, every summer, over the next 5 years. So that's kind of our goal. COVID is still hope for COVID to go because, it's very difficult to do a virtual internship. So.
Great. Thank you, Kyla. That sounds exciting, really exciting for the students, and it is creating the awareness of the jobs. Interesting to come back 2 years later, 2 years from now, and see where those students are, how many have completed the degrees, and how many are actually working for energy companies.
Right.
But at least you're creating that awareness, which is great.
Sure.
And the parents, I guess, are engaged as well.
Absolutely. In fact, we're getting so many more requests, for parent engagement sessions to understand what are these new career pathways and, how can they support their students. NIPA's got a lot of other workforce development strategies, but that's the part that I'm involved in.
Okay, fantastic, Kyla. Thank you. Now, Pooja, I know that when we talked, you're training folks in the community as well. and giving them jobs. Can you share a little bit about some of the work that you're doing there? It's really exciting work as well.
Sure. And I'll just clarify that our focus is mostly in developing the content of the training and conducting the trainings, and giving them jobs would be, that's something that we hand off in terms of providing them the certifications that is needed. We currently don't have the capability to provide jobs, but we do have the facility and capability to provide the training content and train them. And so we've been actually training the design professionals and the contractor industry on equipment and design of efficient buildings for many, many years. And the idea is that it's going to increase their job growth opportunities and be able to support a wider range of career options based on the trainings that we provide. So that's one aspect of what we do. In addition, we've actually been testing a few strategies within communities to stimulate the job growth within disadvantaged communities. And one of the examples I can give is there is in Chicago, one of the neighborhoods that we're working in is we are engaging in training local building operators on how to operate their multifamily affordable housing buildings. And the trainings are focused on how they can save energy, water, and waste, and improve the building operations within the building so that the occupants can save on their utility bills. But the idea is also to expand that training within the community so that more and more people get involved in getting that training, who can then become building operators for future such buildings within their neighborhoods. So that's one. The other one, I'll just throw it out there. It's interesting. We're waiting for the results of that. It's a behavior intervention study that we're doing through social networking app, and this research tests the energy savings potential of a community-based approach that includes the community members. We train the community members on what are the energy efficient strategies like smart thermostats, and then do some behavior interventions using the social networking app. And this kind of a community-centered engagement will hopefully result in relevant and real-time information about what actually are the social determinants of energy efficiency adoption in these kinds of underrepresented communities of color. And we hope that this information can help design training formats for the community according to their use of energy within their community, and build capacity to support jobs in the future. So those are two examples that I can think of that are related to some of the community related jobs growth work that we're doing.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. Some very innovative and creative ways of reaching the community and getting out there. If there's a high school student that, this is more for you, Kyla, that doesn't live in New York, but wants to get involved in environmental justice. And Pooja, you might have some examples as well. We're not in New York, but we really want to learn more about environmental justice. What can they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's interesting because when I was studying environmental policy a long time ago, environmental justice was I think it was just one or two classes in our ethics class. But now environmental justice issues are really at the forefront of every conversation. They are nationwide environmental justice advocate communities. In New York State, it's really organizations like UPROS or the New York State Environmental Justice Alliance, but these communities are getting together to speak to other advocate groups, so they are represented in almost every state, and they're really driving the agenda. The new Climate Leadership Protection Act of 2019, that was really written by the advocates. So I do feel like if you get involved with an advocacy group, just look up and Google environmental justice advocates, climate justice advocates. They have so many volunteering opportunities, and although sometimes it's not necessarily a very comfortable relationship with us, but we have learned a lot, and they drive the agenda, rightly so, because they have very strong advocates for their communities. So I think that would be the best way as a high school student or even a college student. And then just look to see what your local utility is doing. The industry is being moved to push to include equity and environmental justice issues. So that's kind of the way things are going. And we celebrate that.
That's great. Pooja, your thoughts?
No, I totally agree with Kyla because I'm a board member of the Massachusetts Climate Action Network, and they work with local community organizations in climate agendas. And they provide support to local communities for whether they want to do a campaign or they want to do any advocacy of any kind that is specific to a particular topic related to climate change. And they always are looking for young professionals or young volunteers or interns to support them even in the back end in the back office work or to organize these kinds of events. So definitely that's the first place to go to. And internships, I think more and more companies, utilities Kyla mentioned, and more consulting companies that are involved in climate research or climate action work are also looking for interns. So there's definitely more and more demand for such kind of opportunities for the young generation.
That's great. And I know that at CEWD, or if you get into energy.com, we have our job posting site, and many of our member companies post their internships on that site. And so you'd be able to go in and search by state and find the internships that are available. And I believe many of the companies that do summer internships are probably posting positions as we speak. And so many internships are posted. So I'd encourage folks to look there as well. And then any other, I guess one other thing that I might ask here is, in terms of energy efficiency, and we talked a little bit about that, if someone is looking for a job in that space, or in the space of environmental justice, what skills would be needed? What would you be looking for in terms of those skills? Pooja, do you want to start?
Sure. So all the work that I described that my organization does, we have a very varied mix of backgrounds. So we have engineers, we have architects, we have data experts, we have marketing and communication professionals, we have policy experts, and what did I leave behind? And researchers. So that is the mix of, and economists, actually. That's a key thing as well. So we are a wide mix of all backgrounds that come together to find solutions for climate challenge. And so I think there's a variety of backgrounds that are needed to make that happen. So yeah, that's the mix I can think of. And in terms of the organizations where they can actually be working in, there's utilities, there's federal government, there's local governments, the cities. The cities are also, working in designing their climate action plans, and there's always a need for the staff to be producing those climate action plans. Then there's foundations who are also interested in doing climate work, and then consulting companies and nonprofits like us.
Great. Kyla, anything to add? I know the energy companies do hire lots of jobs in that space.
Yes, so in terms of environmental justice specifically, I recently hired 4 young people that were sort of a year out of college or just graduated. Really, what I was looking for was just not necessarily a very a science background, but an understanding of the science, because we're trying to communicate kind of environmental policy, energy policy, and so an understanding of the technology, understanding of, so that we can reach our communities, but somebody who is really relatable and able to just, do a diverse, reach out diverse audience, first of all, because our communities are, as I think Pooja already talked about them, we also deal with the tribal communities, we have urban communities, rural communities, environmental justice communities. Sometimes it's not who you think, sometimes, people think it's really an urban issue, but it's statewide. And so just that ability to be able to relate and just an understanding of the science, really, so that we can really talk about what does decarbonization mean and break those terms down. what is electric vehicles, how does it work, and how does it interrelate with energy policy? What is solar, what is wind, and how does it, just breaking down those terms for our communities so that it's relatable and accessible.
Good. Fantastic. I think we're reaching the end of our time. Where can folks find out more information? And I think you did tell us where they can go. Any other thoughts in terms of how they can get more information on your programs or anything else?
In terms of us, sorry, I'll jump in. We have the New York Power Authority, NYPA.gov, and we have a virtual learning center on our environmental justice page, because during COVID, we couldn't go out and reach our constituents. So we decided to post a lot of videos on our websites. We have a virtual learning center. That might be a good place to go and get started. And you can contact us there as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Pooja?
And our website is slipstreaminc.org. And we actually also have a lot of free trainings available online. If you click on, search for trainings, we have all kinds of trainings on all kinds of energy efficiency topics. And those are all mostly free unless you want a certification of AI or other continuing education credits. So it's a great way to learn if you have the free time. And we have I think about 150 plus trainings uploaded.
Wow.
During the pandemic. We were trying to make it more accessible to more people. So yeah, that's a great way to start.
That's great. And then Claire just posted on the chat feature ways to keep the conversation going. We have a LinkedIn event at EnergyCareers 2021, and it's through our LinkedIn. The link is there. Just click on it, and it's a way to network with others from the industry, and so you can ask questions there, etc. So those in the audience, feel free to click on that link, and it takes you to LinkedIn. Thank you, Pooja, Kyla. You were amazing. You're doing some amazing work for the industry. I'd like to come back a year from now and see and ask the same questions and see where you are, but I know would have some tremendous progress. So thank you, Kyla. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you to the audience for participating. We did have a question. Pooja, would you mind sharing the link in the chat feature to your trainings? That would be great. For those in the audience, please visit our exhibit booth. This webinar is recorded and will be available for 9 additional days till the 29th of October. So feel free to come back or forward it to someone else to register and listen in if you think someone else would find this valuable. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon. Claire, you're typing something, so I don't want to hang up. Pooja is typing as well. There's the link. So there's the link to the training for those of you who might be interested. Just click on the link, and that will take you to the training. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Pooja.
you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thanks.
All right. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.